Hi guys, it's Emma AITA, your favorite AI slop tuber. Before we jump into today's video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks so much for your support. Now, let's get right into the video. AITA for putting a lock on my bedroom door because my roommate keeps barging in unannounced. I, 28 female, have lived with my roommate, Sarah, 27 female, for about a year now in a 2-bedroom apartment in the city. We met through a friend, had a great first impression, and agreed on splitting rent and utilities evenly. The apartment is modest but cozy, and it seemed like the perfect fit for both of us at the time. I'm a graphic designer, and Sarah works in marketing. We both have fairly flexible schedules, but I'm more introverted and cherish my alone time, especially after work or when I'm trying to focus on a project. At the beginning, everything went smoothly. We shared cooking duties, cleaned the common areas regularly, and hung out occasionally watching movies or grabbing coffee. But one thing started to bother me pretty early on. Sarah has this habit of barging into my bedroom unannounced. It started with small things, like grabbing something she forgot in the kitchen that she thought might be in my room, or wanting to borrow a book or charger. She'd just open my door and walk in without knocking or even calling out. Sometimes I'd be in the middle of an important freelance project, headphones on, completely focused, and she'd interrupt me. I tried to be polite and casually mention that I prefer if she knocks or sends a message before entering, but it didn't really stick. Sarah has a very bubbly, energetic personality and seems to think that living together means constant interaction and no closed doors. I get that to some degree, but I value my privacy. My room is my sanctuary. I have personal stuff, diaries, sensitive documents, clothes, and I just don't feel comfortable with someone walking in whenever they want. The breaking point came about 3 months ago. I was going through some intense personal stuff, had just ended a long-term relationship and was trying to heal. I'd been spending more time in my room, journaling and processing everything. One afternoon, I was crying quietly, sitting on my bed, when Sarah walked in without knocking, saw me, and laughed it off, saying I was being too dramatic, and that I needed to cheer up. I felt so exposed and humiliated that I asked her to leave, which led to a huge argument. Since then, I started locking my bedroom door when I was home alone or needed privacy. Sarah immediately noticed and got upset. She said I was being secretive and putting up walls, that a roommate isn't supposed to lock doors, and that it felt like I was treating her like a stranger or an enemy. Our communication has deteriorated. She's been passive-aggressive, leaving my dishes in the sink, blasting music late at night, and inviting friends over without telling me. I feel like the apartment has turned into a battleground, and honestly, it's exhausting. After locking my door, I tried to explain to Sarah why it was important to me. I told her that the lock was about creating a space where I could feel safe and in control, especially during stressful times, and not about pushing her away or keeping secrets. I reminded her that we both have our own rooms, and that respect for each other's privacy was crucial to peaceful cohabitation. I even offered that if she needed anything or wanted to talk, I was always open to scheduling a time or knocking first, but it felt like my words just bounced off a wall. Sarah, however, was convinced that locking the door was a personal attack. She started saying things like, "If you don't trust me, why are we even roommates?" And, "This isn't a hotel where you lock yourself away all day." Our conversations turned more and more confrontational. She'd accuse me of being antisocial and cold, and suggested that maybe I should find a place to live by myself if I wanted that much space. The tension in the apartment made my mental health worse. I dreaded coming home because it felt like walking into a conflict zone. I tried reaching out to mutual friends to mediate or get advice, but most people took Sarah's side, saying that roommates should share and be open, that locking doors was a red flag and not normal roommate behavior. That hurt because I was trying to set healthy boundaries, not build walls to keep her out. One night, things escalated. Sarah had some friends over without telling me. The noise was loud and it went past midnight. I asked her politely to keep it down or have the guests leave soon because I had an early morning meeting. She ignored me and told me to deal with it. I felt disrespected, so I decided to lock my door that night. In the morning, Sarah confronted me again, furious. She said locking the door during a party was selfish and made her feel excluded. She also accused me of trying to control the apartment and said I was creating this weird divide. I tried explaining that it wasn't about controlling anyone, it was about needing a safe space to retreat to when things got overwhelming. Over time, the atmosphere worsened. Sarah's attitude became colder, and she started leaving passive-aggressive notes like, "Maybe you should get a dog to keep you company since you don't want people around." I ignored the notes, but I felt isolated. I even started thinking about moving out, but breaking the lease early would cost me a lot of money, and I don't want to give up the apartment if I don't have to. I suggested to Sarah that maybe we could talk to a mediator or a counselor to help us communicate better, but she brushed it off and said it would be a waste of time. Recently, I heard through the grapevine that Sarah has been telling other friends that I'm cold, secretive, and unfriendly, and that she can't wait to move out. This really stings because I never wanted to turn our friendship or living situation sour. I feel stuck between wanting to protect my mental space and feeling guilty for upsetting her. Since the tension in the apartment kept building, I tried reflecting on whether there was something I could do differently. I considered maybe I was being too rigid or overreacting about the door lock. After all, living with someone inevitably means compromise, right? But every time I gave an inch, Sarah seemed to expect more access or dismiss my needs. One afternoon, Sarah confronted me directly. She said, "I get that you want privacy, but it's like you don't trust me at all. How are we supposed to live like this if you're locking your door all the time? It feels like you don't want me around." I understood her point, but I reminded her that trust wasn't the issue. It was about respect for boundaries. I said, "Trust means I know you won't invade my space when I need to be alone. It doesn't mean you get a free pass anytime you want." That seemed to frustrate her more. At this point, I realized we had different expectations of what living together should look like. Sarah saw shared living as constant togetherness, like roommates as friends, whereas I saw it as sharing the rent and space but still needing personal boundaries. She grew up in a very social household, where doors were never locked and privacy wasn't emphasized, while I'm used to a quieter, more private environment. This difference made me question, was I too isolated or antisocial? Was I shutting her out? But I also knew I needed mental space to recharge, and my room was the one place I could find it. Around this time, I started reading about healthy roommate relationships and personal boundaries. I learned that it's absolutely normal to expect knocks before entering, and that locking your own bedroom door is not uncommon, especially when living with someone who doesn't respect your privacy. I also tried to improve communication. I began leaving little notes on my door when I needed quiet time or wasn't available, so Sarah wouldn't have to guess. I made an effort to hang out more in shared spaces when I wasn't working or overwhelmed, to show that I wasn't shutting her out completely. But Sarah's behavior didn't improve much. The passive-aggressive notes and snide remarks continued, and sometimes she'd make a point of barging into my room just to show she could. I confronted her once asking why she was intentionally disrespecting me, and she said she was just trying to get a reaction because she felt ignored and hurt. It became clear that her issues weren't just about the door lock, but also about feeling excluded or lonely. I sympathized with her loneliness, but felt it wasn't fair for her to force her way into my personal space to cope. In the end, I decided to have a sit-down conversation with her to lay everything out honestly. I explained how important privacy was to me, and that locking the door was a way to protect my mental health, not a rejection of her as a person. I also acknowledged that maybe I could be more proactive about spending time with her in common areas to help her feel included. Sarah admitted she felt hurt by the lock because it reminded her she was living with someone who didn't want her constant presence. She apologized for barging in and for the passive-aggressive behavior, though she said it was hard for her to adjust. We agreed to some ground rules. She would knock and wait for a response before entering my room, and I would try to be more social in common areas and invite her out for coffee or walks regularly. Since then, things have gotten better, but not perfect. There are still moments of tension, but the door lock stays, and Sarah respects it most of the time. We're still figuring out how to live together in a way that balances her need for connection and my need for solitude. Since our honest conversation and the establishment of new boundaries, the atmosphere in the apartment has noticeably improved, though it hasn't been without its bumps. Sarah has generally respected my locked door and knocks before entering, and I've made an effort to be more socially available when I can. I've invited her to dinners or movie nights, and sometimes we hang out in the living room, which has helped rebuild some trust between us. However, the underlying tension from earlier incidents occasionally bubbles to the surface, reminding me that trust, once broken or strained, takes time and effort to fully repair. One thing I've noticed is that Sarah's initial resistance to the lock seemed rooted in her personal experience of living in a much more communal environment growing up. This difference in upbringing, where privacy meant something very different to each of us, was a major factor in our conflict. I've come to realize that sometimes roommate conflicts aren't just about the immediate issue, but about deeper differences in expectations and communication styles. On my end, putting a lock on my bedroom door was about much more than just physical privacy. It was about protecting my mental health, maintaining a sense of safety in my own home, and setting boundaries that felt necessary for me to function daily. For years, I'd tolerated being interrupted constantly and feeling like my space was never my own. When I finally acted on it, it wasn't to be difficult, but to take care of myself. And while that action led to some hurt feelings and friction, I do not regret it. I've been reflecting on the lessons this experience has taught me about boundaries, communication, and empathy. Living with someone means compromise, but it also means having the courage to speak up for your needs. even if it's uncomfortable. I hope that anyone reading this who's struggling with similar issues might understand that setting boundaries is healthy, even if it ruffles feathers at first. True respect in a shared living space includes respecting each other's need for privacy. Of course, I also acknowledge that locking a door can come off as extreme to some, and perhaps there could have been ways to address the issue earlier, such as setting clearer expectations or talking more openly before it got to that point. But hindsight is 20/20, and I believe I did the best I could with what I knew and felt at the time. So, Reddit, I ask again. Am I the asshole for putting a lock on my bedroom door to protect my privacy, despite the impact it had on my relationship with my roommate? I'm open to honest opinions, even if it's hard to hear.